My next guest is someone who's a very dear friend and someone who has been fighting the deep state for many years. And her front in taking on the deep state is in protecting children and exposing much of the criminality that is present actually within religious organizations. Sad to say, but true. Liz Yore is an experienced attorney in a variety of general counsel roles in nonprofits, government, privately held corporations. She founded the organization Yore, Y-O-R-E, like her last name, Yore, Y-O-R-E, YourChildren.com. She's a consultant and expert witness on a range of child protection issues, including abduction, child welfare abuse, neglect, human trafficking, and child pornography. She's has a huge presence within the media due to her vast experience on these issues. She is the former general counsel of the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. She is the former chief deputy general counsel of the Department of Children and Family Services as well in Chicago. She is also the former chief legal officer and director of International Division and director of the Internet Child Exploitation Division of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in Arlington, Virginia. She graduated from Georgetown University School of Washington, D.C. She got her Bachelor's of Arts degree, and she got her law degree from the great Loyola University in Chicago. It's my honor to welcome back my friend Liz Yore. Liz, welcome back to Operation Freedom.
Dave, it's great to be with you, and Happy New Year. It's going to be a wild ride in 2021.
Well, I hope it's a good wild ride because I'm tired of the bad wild rides we had in 2020. So Liz, give us your take of what, we have some big events happening this week, starting on, I think we're going to see some developments over even on Monday and Tuesday. Ed, where do you see us going on Wednesday and the like and afterwards?
Well, Dave, I don't read tea leaves, but I do believe that the momentum of the quote-unquote deplorables has put pressure on our elected officials to do the right thing. I mean, after all, we have a right at a bare minimum to expect a fair, equitable, and honest election. Clearly, this election was not. The evidence every day keeps rolling in, to my shock and horror. I'm so shocked by the election, but I'm even more shocked by the denial of not only the Democrats, but also many of the Republicans who refuse to step up and fight for the integrity of our republic. And, I think everybody is recognizing, as you do, that we are at the apex. This is a tipping point. Here we are. And if we cannot have fair and equitable elections, then we are no longer a governing republic. So it's, it's both in my mind, both a spiritual as well as a political battle. Many recognize it as, having both those dimensions. It is a battle. Archbishop Vigano, the whistleblower from the Vatican, calls it an epic battle of the children of light versus the children of darkness. And the children of darkness being represented by the deep state, by Joe Biden. And this epic battle is playing out as it, frankly has played out. And you've done so much to enlighten people in the last 4 years. This is what the battle has been, to suppress the truth, to make up lies, to undermine the integrity of the entire judicial and legal system in the United States. So I think, here we are in probably the most momentous week in the history of our country.
Liz, you are incredibly courageous, as I mentioned in your introduction, and you speak about issues that, very few, if anybody else, will speak about because the blowback is significant. I'm going to mention three people's names. You already mentioned one of the people I want to speak about, Vigano. But I'm going to mention three people's names, and for our listening audience, I want you to give your take and how they fit into this big picture, not only the election picture, but the deep state picture. The three people are the following: the Pope, the current Pope, a guy by the name of McCarrick, and Cardinal Vigano, Archbishop Vigano.
All right. Well, they're very connected. First of all, for your audience, if they don't know, Cardinal McCarrick, who has been laicized, which means he's lost his title and his ability to be a priest, because he was, in my mind and in many minds, the global serial sexual predator of boys and young men. That he reached almost the highest point you can in the church as a cardinal. He was the cardinal of Washington, D.C. He wielded tremendous power, both financially as well as politically. He was, as I think we may have talked about previously, he was involved as the secret diplomatic channel for the Obama-Biden administration in negotiating the secret Cuba deal. He and Pope Francis were involved in that secret deal, and it was so secret that even the State Department Cuba desk did not even know it was going on. And of course, the reason why, and you know this, Dave, from your work in global politics, the Cuban Americans raised holy hell when they found out that this deal had been negotiated and was signed. And by the time they found out about it, there was little that they could do to raise a ruckus. But it was to normalize relations between the United States and the brutal, tyrannical Cuba communist government. McCarrick was very involved in that. McCarrick was also a notorious sexual predator of seminarians, of young boys, and this man was protected by officials, not only in the Catholic Church, but political officials. He was in many respects the spiritual counselor for the Democratic Party, for the likes of Ted Kennedy, Joe Biden, Pat Leahy. You name a Democrat, and he was either marrying them or burying their family, and he was able to insert himself into all political events, not only the social ones, but the high-stake diplomatic ones. He was a radical liberal. Many believe, as I do, that he was a communist infiltrated into the Catholic Church to undermine the teachings of the Catholic Church. And when Pope Francis became Pope, he was told personally, face-to-face, by Archbishop Vigano that Ted McCarrick, who had since been retired, was a sexual predator of the worst kind, and that there was a file basically a mile high in the Vatican and a dossier about his notorious deeds and victims. Well, for your audience, Archbishop Vigano was the Vatican ambassador to the United States from 2011 to 2016. As a result, he was here in the United States during the Obama-Biden administration. He was able to observe and get a front row seat, frankly, on what was going on in that administration, as well as being, intimately involved in what the politics of going on in the church, as well as in the United States. He refers to the collusion of the deep state and the deep church. Which I think is very interesting because he also points out that the predator, Ted McCarrick, was the liaison, the connecting tissue, if you will, between the deep state and the deep church, both of whom are pushing the globalist agenda. And certainly Pope Francis, from the moment he became Pope, not only brought in Cardinal McCarrick to negotiate his secret deal with China. McCarrick went at least 3 times to China at the behest of the Pope. In fact, one of the Pope's first pieces of correspondence on the day he became Pope was to President Xi. And so it was an effort on the part of this Pope to begin the normalization of relations with shockingly to the brutal CCP China government. And this is a government that has persecuted for 70 years not only the Catholic Church, but also Christians and all religions in China. So it is unconscionable that Pope Francis, the Vicar of Christ, would reach out and begin not only negotiations with the CCP, but then to sign a secret deal. And of course, we know why it was secret, because if anybody would learn the terms of the agreement, there would be shock and horror, and the secret agenda of this papacy would be exposed. And for those that don't know, and I have followed this papacy, I met the Pope in 2013, and frankly, Dave, got a heads up, first eye. I looked at him firsthand and saw and observed that what was going on was a radical agenda, a radical left agenda of climate change, of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, of pushing migration, refugee migration into Europe. You'll probably recall in 2016, this Pope stepped into the void of a political election and called Trump unchristian for wanting to build walls. I mean, keep in mind, and I know anybody who's been to Rome and the Vatican knows that there's a huge, impenetrable 37-foot cement wall surrounding the entire Vatican City. So the hypocrisy of the Pope to criticize President Trump for wanting to protect the sovereignty and keep our country safe at the borders is absolutely absurd, but nevertheless he did. And he has been repeatedly criticizing capitalism and criticizing President Trump. So there has been an ongoing, albeit a cold war, I would say, between the Vatican and President Trump, because President Trump, frankly, as we know, is a leader of the nationalist movement, and he has been instrumental in protecting sovereignty and frankly, has provided leadership for the world, to the horror and frustration of the globalists of George Soros, and Joe Biden and Obama and the rest of them, and Hillary Clinton. And so this has been, and what I think is very interesting, because the Vatican whistleblower, Archbishop Vigano, has alerted all of us to this dark connection between the left church, which is represented by Cardinal McCarrick, now Theodore McCarrick, and the deep state, represented by Obama, Biden, Hillary, and the rest of the radical Dems. And they have been working in concert for years to undermine the sovereignty of the United States and to push this radical agenda. Now, we saw the Pope has been, very instrumental in pushing not only the Sustainable Development Goals, but he is now, to my horror and the horror of many Catholics, pushing the alliance with China. And in fact, going so far as to saying that China is a country that is best implementing Catholic social justice. I mean, it has, 3 million Uyghurs in concentration camps. It's been closing down, destroying churches left and right. There's no freedom of religion, freedom of expression, and arresting left and right priests and bishops of both the Catholic Church and pastors in the Christian Church. So it is shocking beyond our imagination that this is playing out. Quite frankly, there's been indications by Vigano, Archbishop Vigano, the whistleblower, that the deep state may have been involved in having Pope Benedict, the previous Pope, toppled, and then also having Pope Francis installed as Pope. He certainly has promoted in every way the globalist agenda. And, quite frankly, what has happened is the globalists never had a moral voice, right? I mean, you can't say that the climate change people of, Al Gore or Leo DiCaprio had a moral voice, but now they have captured the Vatican, which has been, I think, their goal all along, to undermine the Catholic Church, and now they have their spokesman in Pope Francis. And President Xi, who is the president of China, said in 2017 when he spoke at Davos, the globalist conference where all the rich and famous go, he said in 2017, all roads lead to Rome. And quite frankly, he was pointing to the fact, and none of us, I think, were really paying attention like we should have been, that the Rome road was to the Vatican, and that he has secured the support and political cover of the pontiff of the Catholic Church. In so doing, Francis remains silent about religious persecution, not only in China, not only in Europe or in Nigeria, but around the world. And as a result, he has remained silent, as well as Hong Kong in the freedom marches. They have begged the Pope to speak out against what's going on in Hong Kong, the persecution by the CCP. Yet he remains silent, as do, frankly, most of the bishops in the United States and around the world. So this is a historic spiritual battle of epic and probably biblical proportions, as those of us who have followed it closely. I know you have, Dave, certainly, day in and day out. And here we are in the United States. The United States has been the last bastion, for freedom and democracy. And that's what's at stake this week. And I know Americans of every shape and size, wealth and poverty, are stepping up and speaking out and doing what they can and praying and on their knees. That has to continue. I don't know what's going to happen this week, but I suspect that with prayer, with a concerted effort that is now building, that we will prevail. But it's going to be a battle, and we have to toughen up our skin, and be fighters in this. Those days of living in the lap of luxury and being able to speak our truth are gone, as you know so well. And so we've got to figure out more creative ways of speaking out and toughen up our hide and go to take up arms, spiritual arms and moral arms, and make sure that our country remains the bastion of freedom. And so it's interesting that, in my mind, that this battle is driven by both this connection between the deep state and the deep church. So
folks,
that's my assessment.
We're speaking with Liz Yore from Yore, Y-O-R-E, yorechildren.com. Liz, I want to address this. Many people really quite interesting, but Liz must be, because this is the comments you get. I just want to address this because this is ridiculous. People say, well, Liz is speaking against McCarrick, and she's speaking against the Pope and some of these policies with links to China because she's anti-Catholic. In fact, you're a practicing Catholic, Liz, correct?
Correct, I am. And, in the history of the papacy, there have been 30 more bad popes. We're not, necessarily immune from having a bad pope. In my assessment, after much research, after much personal observation of this man, I think we are in a world of trouble under this papacy. And every statement he's made has proved that. So I believe in speaking the truth. That's what the nuns taught me in Catholic schools. And it doesn't lessen my love for the Catholic Church. I mean, just like, because there's a deep state doesn't mean we don't love our country any less, right?
That's exactly right. And Liz,
so,
what's the best way for folks to follow you on a regular basis?
well, I have yourchildren.com, which is my website, YORE Children. I'm on Twitter, Elizabeth Yore. I'm on Parler as well, under Elizabeth Yore, as well as on Facebook.